Afternoon and welcome to the Senate Labor and Technology Committee. Today is Monday, April 17th at 3:00 p.m. We are in conference room 224. Is that right? I'm Sharon Moriwaki, chair of the committee, and we will soon be seeing other senators joining us. Before proceeding with the hearing, I'd like to make a few housekeeping announcements. This hearing is being streamed live on YouTube. You can find links to viewing options for all Senate meetings on the live and on-demand video page of the legislature's website. In the unlikely event that we encounter major technical difficulties during the hearing, must end it abruptly, we will reconvene on Wednesday, April 19th at 3:00 p.m. in this conference room, 224, and via video conference. If there are technical glitches during anyone on Zoom, we will move to the next person. Written testimony is available on the legislature's website. The time slot for the hearing is 90 minutes, and we hope to accommodate everyone and limit your testimony to 2 minutes. And here is Vice Chair Senator Lee. Today's hearing will be considering whether to advise and consent on two gubernatorial nominees, GM 503 Doug Murdoch as the Chief Information Officer and GM 513 Brenna Hashimoto as the Director of the Department of Human Resources Development. Let's see. Let me see. We will first receive testimonies on each, and then followed by the statement by the candidate, and then followed by questions from the committee. So first off is GM 503, considering whether to advise and consent on Doug Murdoch as a gubernatorial nominee as Chief Information Officer for a term to expire at noon on December 7th, 2026. First testimony is from Jordan Lowe in support. By the way, all these testimonies are in support. I got no opposition and no comments. So we will go with all of the in-person testimonies first and anybody on Zoom. And we will proceed with a statement by the nominee. DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources. Anyone here from DLNR in support? Tommy Johnson, I don't see him in support. From the Department of Public Safety. I guess it's Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. From the Department of Human Resources Development, Brenna Hashimoto. Kathy Betts and Joseph Campos just walked in for the Department of Human Services.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair Joseph Campos, Deputy Director, Department of Human Services, here on behalf of both myself as well as Director Betts in strong support. Mr. Murdoch has been extremely helpful, throughout the pandemic, helping us with our technology. He's extremely responsive, and we look forward to continue to work with him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer Hallison, an individual in support.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Hi.
I will stand in my written testimony. I very much support it.
Thank you. Scott Murakami in support.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, Scott Murakami, my individual capacity. I was your former DLIR director during COVID-19. And I just wanted to say that during the crisis, Doug and the ETS team, they worked tirelessly with our DLIR IT team and our contractors and they played a really instrumental role in making sure that our SQL gateway and the SQL replicated data system that offloaded all the UI filing claims from the antiquated system worked and helped with the implementation as well as load balancing the mainframe. And they did it in a very collegial and collaborative way. So I just wanted to publicly thank Doug and his ETS team, and I strongly support his nomination and humbly ask for your support. Mahalo.
Thank you. Thank you. I have written testimony from the Department of Transportation. It's Sniffen in support. All of these are in support. Testifying for the governor, Josh Green in support. Testifying for the Department of Budget and Finance. Oh, you're here. Okay.
Chair, Louis Oliveria, Vice Chair, we will stand on our testimony and strong support of them.
Thank you. And Sabrina Nasser, also from BNF, Department of Health in support. Hakeem Wansafi, Hawaii Public Housing Authority, Office of Elections, Scott Nago, Bonnie Kaukui from the State Procurement Office, Jay Butai from Department of Labor, and Gary Suganuma from the Department of Taxation. So I have 18 individuals also in support. So moving on to the nominee, Mr. Murdoch, please come forward. Your statement, please.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. I'm Doug Murdoch, the nominee for Chief Information Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As you know, I served as CIO for the past 4 years. I'm honored that Governor Green decided to nominate me for the next 4 years to continue serving the state. I'm very proud of what ETS and the state IT workforce have accomplished over the past 4 years. A lot of it was really remarkable. I want to thank the great staff at ETS and the IT workforce for their commitment and very hard work to keep things running. I'm very much looking forward to what we can do for the next 4 years. ETS has a strategic plan for state IT that includes our vision, mission statement, value statements, and 7 pillars or strategies that we operate on. We have always worked in alignment with this plan, and in fact, our annual report is based on this plan, each of the sections for each of the strategies. As we move in the direction of IT consolidation, I see our vision and mission changing somewhat. I think our vision will be to help the state utilize the full potential of IT to serve our citizens. And our mission will be to be the state's center of excellence for information technology to help all the departments complete what they need to do to serve their clientele. The pillars of our strategic plan will stay basically the same: partner with knowledge workers for successful outcomes on business systems, expand our state cybersecurity strategy, enhance the value of state data, optimize our enterprise systems, extend IT portfolio governance, implement dynamic and sustainable IT operations, and digital workforce development. I want to close by talking about consolidation a little bit, because I think that's the biggest factor of what's going to happen in IT in the next 5 years. We have committees of IT workers across the state, from ETS and the departments, working on the plan that will be released at the end of 2023 to the legislature. One of ETS's greatest strengths historically has been to provide shared services to the state, such as payroll or mainframe as a service like we do right now. The greatest strength of the departments is to run their IT systems that are their line of business applications. I think the best path towards success in the consolidation is to maximize shared services from an ETS perspective and support the departments focusing on their IT business systems. We will enhance the strength of ETS and the departments and lead to better IT services for the state and its citizens with this process. Thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Your question?
Just a few. First of all, congratulations on your nomination and re-upping.
Thank you.
I do want to follow up. There's been obviously a huge multifaceted transition with respect to information sharing and public services being provided. Is the long-term vision, and I haven't been following this closely, so forgive me, but is the long-term vision still sort of a uniform one-stop shop for essentially offering all government services? So from the user perspective, as a regular citizen, you're not dealing with like 18 different apps and one for each department and all that sort of thing?
That is very much where we want to go, and we've started with identity. So we're working on an application right now that everybody could plug into for identity, so that instead of having 18 different login names and passwords, you would just have one to get into the state, which we think will make it easier for the citizens and also reduce fraud. So it has a multi-pronged approach, but it'll really help everybody. And frankly, if the counties want to use it too, I think that would be great. I think people could just approach the state and county governments as one entity in terms of providing services.
And then following on just a bit, there have been some discussions about privacy and data retention and all that sort of stuff in the last couple of months here, or last few years here. As far as where things are at now, is there sort of a long-term plan also, or any sort of direction on how to ensure not only cybersecurity for just state facilities and resources and that sort of thing, but also for the user data, citizens data and residents data within that construct?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is an Information Privacy and Security Council that meets regularly that Vince Hong is normally chairing on my behalf. And they do talk about those issues. Some states have gone to having a chief privacy officer to really focus on those issues even more. But I think the system we have in place right now is good. Vince watches out for both cybersecurity and privacy issues with regard to all of our data. Last year, we did add some cybersecurity staff in order to be able to help the departments make sure they can protect that kind of information. And we're just getting to the process where we can start staffing up in those areas so we can focus more on protecting all that information.
Thanks. And on that point, just following up on sort of the general vision and direction, vacancies have obviously been a huge issue and getting them filled. I'm sure we'll have more discussion about that in a minute here. But for you guys, I mean, it's such a unique environment. We have so much contract work and there's so much to be done outside of purely the scope of the department employees themselves. Is there, or do you foresee, assuming you can fill vacancies and get everything up to speed, there being sort of a shift toward a smaller internal staff that manages a lot more of these outsourced contracts? Or is it going to be still handled largely by state staff would be on top of things?
Everything the state staff can do, I would like them to do. And that's more than just managing contracts. You know, we want to be able to run systems too. We want to be able to do testing and documentation and planning, strategy and governance. There's a lot for us to do, including data analytics and, data reporting, data visualization to look at what's going on. And Safe Travel's digital application was a great laboratory for us to look at all the things that we could do. And we found there was a lot that we could take on that the vendor didn't have to do. So I think we'll continue to be working that balance to try and figure out what they can do and what we need to do. But you are right, it is a challenge for both the vendors and us to find qualified IT workforce. And so we are focusing more on how do we upskill and reskill people once we bring them in so that we can move them up. And we do generally promote from within with an ETS pretty regularly so that we can grow our staff. And the other thing is we really want to get employees who come to us because other employees said it was a good place to work. And, we see that happening too. We've even had a couple of employees come back, after leaving. So I think they're seeing the value of working at ETS and they know the value that we add to the state.
And so just to that end, over the next few years, or I guess this first term, would you project coming back to the legislature for additional positions or resources other than just appropriations for additional contracting?
I think the biggest thing for us will be training. We would like to have a training budget that we could use to upskill the workforce and to give new people that come in an understanding that we will train them, which is what a lot of big IT companies do now. You join up and Google trains you or Salesforce trains you, and we don't really have that built in. There's sort of an assumption, I think, that we hire people fully trained, but then what happens for the next 20 years? If you want to keep them, I think you got to keep growing them. So I think that will be an ask. I think we'll also look at some kind of IT position description management where maybe the position descriptions are better than they are right now and maybe more uniform, because as we try to do consolidation, it's really hard with the job descriptions and such that we have right now that we're working on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Building on what Senator Lee is saying in terms of the digital workforce, that is one of your pillars, I guess, in your strategic plan. And what are you planning to do in terms of not only the classification or what we're looking at broadband that we talked about, but in terms of how do you look at exempt positions, getting higher salaries so that we can compete, as well as internships and bringing people in so that you train them along the way and they have a career to be in the state and not leaving the state.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I grew up in the Air Force where everybody comes in and training is your number one duty from the get-go. And we're just always trying to train people in the Air Force to move to the next job. And for us, that meant going out to departments and then coming back and being in charge and then going back out and then coming back in. So we would go in and out of the field as part of our learning process. I'd like to see that as part of our IT process in the state too, that somebody might start an ETS and then go to DHERD and then come back to ETS and then go out to tax. So we would like our workforce to be more mobile. And that's one of the reasons why I'd like to see the job descriptions normalized a little more. Also giving people a chance to work in cybersecurity for a while or networking or some of the things that might not be in their main job jar, but they could be trained up to do that. So there's a lot of growth opportunities. I think we need to do that and then have a training structure underneath that could qualify people to move. I also think we are going to have to look at, for some positions, entry-level positions, not being a high school graduate or college graduates, but being junior college or high school graduates or having certifications, right?
So good thing we have HRT here. So this fluid back and forth in the department, in a centralized office and back and forth, having that kind of experience and building up your workforce in a way that they understand that IT is a tool for public service or whatever their outcomes are in their departments, I think is critical. And have you or does your governance program look at monitoring or evaluating the IT staff in the department so that you can see, oh, this is a little weak here, we need to train up or do more consultation, or how, do you do any of that with the department staff?
We're not doing that yet, and we've been without HR and ASO for a couple of years because of the pandemic. But that is one of the main goals we need to have them do, is look at that workforce development pillar of our strategy. I think after consolidation, you might see that there'll be some people in departments, but who actually work for ETS, like the networking people, cybersecurity, TC support. And so it'll be possible for us to move people back and forth, you know, as long as they're willing. And then there'll be other people that are really focused on the departmental business system, you know, like the tax system. And they may become more specialized over time, where they're really focused in on the operating language and programming language of the tax system and the ins and outs of that. But, you know, people could move. And I came from DHS. I was there in the IT office before I came to be CIO, and Mark Choi was in ETS and then tax, and now he's at DHS. So we're seeing some movement, and I think it's very healthy, but it's not well planned right now.
So talking about recruitment, where are we with the chief data officer, and what is that person's role, and what are you lacking not having that position, or is it filled yet? No.
It's not filled yet. We had to accomplish a reorganization in order to put that position on the org chart. So that's, I think that'll be done by the end of the week, hopefully. And then we'll be able to start recruiting for the chief data officer. So at first, you know, that very first person is looking at the potential of data and how we can use it better and how we can link data together in different ways to get better information. Like, can we link data on the homeless population? Can we link data on medical benefits? Can we reduce the cost of Medicaid to the state by knowing what everybody else is paying for medical services? So we have ideas. We're running some big projects. Our data strategy so far has really been to rely on system modernization, like the modernization of the payroll system gives us data on payroll that we didn't have before. Time and leave information more accurate and timely. The tax system has a lot of data in it that's available to us. So we've been sort of system by system. I think when we get to chief data officer, we'll start looking at cross system. And we started to do that analysis in our portfolio management system. You know, where is data and who else could it talk to? So I think we'll have a good start for the chief data officer. our vision would be to have a data office, not just a data officer, because in order to do more, you have to have a data scientist and somebody who does data analytics and maybe somebody who does visualization to really present the data the state has in a way that's
Isn't there
consumable.
supposed to be a data task force as well? Is that within the state, or is that externals as well?
There is a informal data task force meeting right now. We're waiting for the chief data officer to kick off, but we will engage both. Will be a public-private partnership.
And getting back to Senator Lee's question about privacy, would the data officer be looking at privacy issues as well as the use of data across departments?
Certainly we'll have that, and also cybersecurity will continue to watch privacy as well, because one of the big risks is just exfiltration of a lot of data in databases full of names and credit card numbers or phone numbers or whatever. So we'll keep an eye on it from all sides.
I'm just talking about data, and I see the budget director here. We have been asking. We've been asking about the program memorandum that was supposed to be done, I don't know, 20 years ago. And brought forward. So you're starting to work on the program memorandum across departments, and it's just exactly what you're talking about, governance and data management across departments and looking at outcomes. So I'm just wondering how, and data is all relating to outcome data rather than activity data, and how OETS might be able to assist in that development as you look at programs and outcomes. What the tool of technology is to quantify. And I don't know, I'm talking, off the top of my head, but it seems to me that you have another pillar to look at in terms of how does government know that it's being effective, not just saying the number of people that came to my program, but what did I do in homeless? What did I do to actually place a person? And whether and how budget and finance and HRD can work together in looking at some of these metrics, not many, but enough to say government is doing its job.
Right. Yeah, you do have a high risk of being overwhelmed by all the data that exists, because there is a lot. And I think finding those meaningful data points that are both good indicators of what's happening and leading indicators of what's going to happen are important to us. And I think it's always important when you're looking at data that you try and classify those indicators to say, okay, that's a leading indicator, that's historical data. We tend to look more at historical data, but what's the leading indicator that says homelessness is going to get worse, or affordability is going down, or we don't have enough houses? Some of those things we know, some of them we don't, but then how do we fix it? So I agree. And we need to keep the number of measures reasonably small. Hawaii Green Growth is a good example of somebody we work with, which has a lot of good leading indicators, both historical and leading indicators on, the future environment in Hawaii. And Governor Green has programs that have that kind of need for data. So we'll be supporting his team, and we continue to support Hawaii Green Growth and anybody else that we can help get the data. I think data in the pandemic was very important, both the trends of health data, but also the traveler data that we kept track of in the Safe Travels digital application. Where are the visitors coming from? And, why are they coming here? And have they gotten their shots, or, did they get tested first?
We always say we do what we measure. So it's, critical, I think, if we look at what do we measure,
Right.
and whether it will be, even in terms of budgeting, we look at just the number of positions and where the positions are and how much we pay for the positions, rather than what are these positions together doing to actually serve the public. And I think that metric isn't there. And I hope that this administration will look at that more seriously as we look at what everybody's calling the new normal, but really it's a new workforce, a new day. And here's the opportunity to do something with transforming the way we do business and the work we do. Maybe not so lockstep, bureaucratic ways of doing things. That this is opportunity.
Well, the governor definitely has in his strategic plan the idea of aggressive change in the right direction. So he and I have talked about data already and how we move in the direction that he wants to.
That's good. And I think that if we have this work, and I know that we put the working group out there for consolidation because it was helter-skelter, it seemed like it was helter-skelter. And the idea was that you work across the executive branch departments to start looking at what are things that we should have across the board, like cybersecurity or procurement for being able to procure more wisely and more cost effectively. But it's also where each department is doing their own thing, and some departments are doing it more effectively than others. And we've had examples where it wasn't done. We didn't have the right procurement scope or the right contract, and so we had to redo. And I'm just wondering how, and departments they're very proprietary. They want to keep their own people. They want to keep their own decision-making and buying their own equipment. And how much of that, what is your approach in that? And have you been moving in that direction? Your working group on consolidation is to look at how might we look at working with the departments, and how have you been working with the departments so that they trust you more. They trust you more to say, hey, I want somebody that has expertise that can tell me that I need to write up the RFP or the contract in a way that will protect my department's interests and get the service I need. How have you been working with departments? How far are you with the 20 departments or 19 departments that we have?
We have been working with them on their portfolio management, all the systems that they have and how they work. And we've helped them measure each system in terms of functional fit, how well the business is fit by the application, and technical fit, how good is the technology. And we've evaluated most of the applications, especially the important ones, based on functional fit and technical fit. And that allows us to do what's called a time analysis, which is tolerate, invest, migrate, or eliminate. So for each system, we come up with this application fit model and help them decide where to work next on improving their IT.
So there's systems and there's equipment and stuff, that's cheaper than
Right.
$1 million or $100,000. What are the small, or does the smaller system impact the largest, or smaller, I guess you call it programs or equipment actually impact the larger system?
Right. Any system larger than $100,000 comes to ETS for review and has to be approved by the CIO. So anything really of consequence we're looking at and seeing how it fits in. If it's networking or cybersecurity, for example, Vince looks at it. If it's operations, Tom looks at it. So we have a process in place. If it's over $1 million, it goes to the program approval committee for their review. And this is a system that was set up probably 8 years ago by the governor and that CIO at the time. But it gives us a great insight into what people are buying. And if we think they should go a different direction, we make that recommendation. And the system will probably await approval until we figure out how to fill any gaps that exist.
So if you've had past vendors that aren't so great, is there a way that you share that with all the departments, or do they all have to come through your review so that you would catch that at any point in time?
It tends to be based on our
review?
people knowledge, that we know somebody's had a problem in the past with a certain vendor. Then we also do research on how vendors are doing in other states if they have similar projects through the National Association of State CIOs. We do background checks before we hire people to see how they're doing. We learn lessons all the time about new things we need to do. We recently had a vendor that was selected. They were supposedly certified for the system that we were buying, but we found out they were not certified for that. They were certified for something else. So it's just depth of review that needs to happen, and diligence and rigor. I think Leonardo da Vinci said there's no obstacle that can't be overcome without enough rigor.
Mhm.
So sometimes we need to put more rigor into what we're doing. And it's a time.
So lessons learned over your last 4 years. I know that a couple of them were spent on safe travels. Thank you very much. But pivoting back to governance and modernizing our systems and many of them legacy. What are your lessons learned on what we need to do, whether it's staffing up, whether it's training, and or looking at ways in which we have shared service or consolidation so we can be sure that we're safe and secure. What have you learned over the last 4 years, given the challenges of COVID set aside? What and where do we need to go?
I think the first thing we learned is that it's really critical to have a center of excellence for project delivery, so that somebody is helping the departments through the process of setting requirements, writing an RFP, and then writing a contract, that process. And so we have set up that with your help and the Senate's help. We did set up our project delivery office. Some of them are here today. General Adjun's done a great job of getting them started and putting up a website that has all kinds of helpful information. And then whenever a new project is starting, she reaches out to them and works on helping them in any way she can. We need to have a little more formal governance within the departments themselves. Some have it, some don't. So we just need to, like everybody, have a similar level of project strategy and governance. But
So
I
in
think
that regard,
yeah.
what would be the basic minimum that you would need in the department so that it makes the integration between department and getting the support they need in a way that you can support them, so that we are almost seamless in a sense, to provide the kind of technical tools that departments need to do their subject matter work. Is there a basic minimum that you would say, okay, departments, let's beef you up because you don't have the ABC, or you kind of wait until they have a problem?
it is very dependent on the size of the project in terms of millions of dollars and time to execute. So if it were a $3 million project, I would say they need 3 people, a project manager, a technical expert, and a business expert. They could make up those 3 people with a combination of other people who are doing, other duties as assigned. But that's always risky because your other duty seems to be your primary duty that you get called on. So we like to see 3 people. If it was $10 million project that's going to take 2 or 3 years, I would like to see 10 people on it. That's just my kind of easy rule of thumb. There's a point where you get diminishing returns, but as the system gets bigger, you need a full-time test expert. You need a full-time documentation expert. You need a full-time scheduler. You might even need a full-time contract manager for a really big system. So it depends.
What I like about your approach on addressing these legacy systems is that you do on the front end, the business reengineering. I guess we always learn garbage in, garbage out, that you do that. And I'm just wondering who in the department, because they've got their real work to do, and then now comes along additional work to see. You need to almost step back to see, why am I doing what I'm doing? I mean, do I need to do it? And those kinds of questions, and who does that? Because I think that's the hard part of the work to be done to
Right.
re-engineer. And
Business re-engineering, business process re-engineering, and organizational change management are 2 of the hardest things to do anytime, because you have to get the people ready for the system. So sometimes business process re-engineering is done through a separate contract before we execute the contract for the modernization. If the system, you kind of know what you want to do, and what's not working in your old system, you can use business process re-engineering to reduce risk in the implementation of the modernization. Sometimes the business process re-engineering will depend on the architecture of the system you're buying. So if I'm going to buy an accounting system, the architecture of that accounting system probably drives my business process re-engineering more than I would do on my own, planning on my own. So it does just depend on the kind of system and
so
working that way.
your modernization team, does that happen in the front end when you talk? Because most departments are saying, I want technology, so I want to buy all this equipment because I
Right.
need to do it now. And when and how, or have you developed a process for departments to know, okay, I really need this now, but what do I need to do pre-purchase? And you don't have to answer that now, but I think, because that's a long process, but I think that's critical because as you work on the working group, to look at that, I know you have 13 committees or something, but I think one of the committees should be, what is the pre-technology purchase point
Yeah.
where you have to do this business engineering, because I think it's really an important part of buying whatever you need.
I think we have to have readiness gates that people go through on the way to launching a new modernization project. The federal government, when they give us federal funds, certainly requires certain readiness gates to be completed before they will authorize the spending, and there are forms that have to be filled out and reports that have to be provided for Medicaid or SNAP or TANF benefits. So the readiness gates, some people will see them as an impediment, but in my mind, in the end, they finish faster if they start better.
One last question on teleworking. I know you do teleworking. We're all really focused on teleworking. And you've been doing it for some time. And I guess the question is, how have you measured performance? Because that's been the top of mind for us, of staff working remotely, and how have you done that for your staff?
We don't have a formal documentation system. We're relying on the supervisors to assign work and make sure their work gets done. We do require everybody to come in 2 days a week at a minimum, and they usually all come in together. So the entire cybersecurity group comes in, or the entire modern technologies group comes in, so they can see each other and talk together and work on things like that. I do keep track of the projects that I'm paying the most attention to, and then, the next level keeps track, the next level keeps track. So there are several levels of eyes looking at how we're progressing in ETS to make progress. But we do sometimes on projects have project management software that keeps track of where we are and are we ahead or behind. All the big system modernizations have that kind of tracking. And sometimes it goes clear down to the actual worker and what they're doing, because we do a lot of times do resource planning by person and modernization, so that we can make sure that one person isn't responsible for 50% of the things that are due on a certain date, which is a clear fail. That's a red flag for sure, that we have to spread that work out or change the schedule, one or the other. So we can be good at it. And there are really simple things like Kanban boards that just say, here's what I'm doing, here's what I did, here's what's next. And we sometimes use those just to keep track of progress as well. So there are systems available, and I think how we do it in IT would be different than how they would do it, for example, in DHS, where they're tracking client contact. They'll have a different measurement, where maybe a project management plan isn't necessary, but their number of clients they've helped is important.
Okay.
Just one follow-up on that point. Quickly we've become sort of a hybrid remote work society, and where that goes 5 or maybe even 10 years from now is anybody's guess. But I think everyone generally agrees that it's going to be more remote than not, and more flexible than before. To that end, we have all these different departments that have different functions, some of them very specific, that can't be done remotely, but could be if the right tools were in place. How do you feel about ETS as a place that can help develop a lot of that capacity, whether it's appropriate to implement right now or not, but having that planning and that capacity building to ensure that when the next administration rolls around, or whenever the next department director is ready for it, they're able to take advantage of that sort of thing?
It's so amazing that at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was a little worried, what would happen if everybody went home. And then I started to learn pretty quickly that we were in a great position for working from home, because we had Office 365, they could do email at home. We had Adobe e-sign so they could do signatures and routing from home. We had, as part of Office 365, we had Teams all built in already, and we went to Teams calling, like for the state procurement office that was having to call overseas to look for masks. So we had the tool set in place that we had paid for already that enabled us to do most work. And the people who weren't able to work from home tended to be people that were dealing with
Like public facing.
particularly sensitive information, like tax information or law enforcement information or things, they might have had to stay in just because of controls on the network. So we were ready. And some of the things I thought we would use more, like VPN, virtual private networks, they were used in some departments and not in others, but they already had experience using VPN. So I don't know that we had any departments that couldn't work from home because they didn't know how or didn't have the right tool set. Look, we've all become so good at Zoom and Teams and everything, and that almost started on day one. I think we hired the Safe Travels digital application contractor and Google, and all of our meetings, every day, every morning, we met with them to keep everything working smoothly, and they were all online. So
I think that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic.
yeah, the state was ready, and I think we're still ready. And we can do more, I think, especially making sure that the legacy applications that didn't perform well, like unemployment insurance, are modernized. And some things like disability compensation have already been modernized since the pandemic. They're almost done with the document management part. PUC is doing a document management project. DLNR had digitized a lot of its records already so they could be searched online. So I think the state's moving in a great direction, and we were surprisingly ready for the pandemic.
Well, thanks. Thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to GM 513. Submitting for consideration confirmation as Director of the Department of Human Resources Development, gubernatorial nominee Brenna Hashimoto for term to expire on December 7th, 2026. We will receive testimony first from, let's see, Jordan Lowe, if he's here. No, all of these also are all in support. Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Oh, Dean. Thank you. Tommy Johnson, Department of Public Safety. Oh, no, Department of Law Enforcement. No, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Melody Martin, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Kathy Joseph Campos, Department of Human Services.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Joseph Campos, Deputy Director, Department of Human Services. Here on behalf of myself as well as Director Betts, we stand on our written testimony and strong support, but I would just like to add a few things. Ms. Hashimoto has been or was the department's human resource officer since 2016. And both Director Betts as well as I have, direct knowledge of her abilities. And that is why we submitted testimony and strong support. During the pandemic, Ms. Hashimoto was extremely integral in working with myself and Director Betts in figuring out our path forward for our workforce. And she really worked diligently to ensure that we had a responsive workforce that was able to respond to the needs of the people of Hawaii and ensure that they received all of the benefits and services that they were eligible for. So with that, that's one of the reasons why we are in extremely strong support of Ms. Hashimoto. Thank you.
Jay Batai, Department of Labor, Industrial Relations, Jennifer Egami, and Ryan Imani.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair. Sorry for my voice. I'm not channeling my inner Marlon Brando, but all of our division heads worked me too hard, so I got acid reflux. Just wanted to briefly state that I've been working with Acting Director Hashimoto for 4 months. Want you to know that she has the vision, the talent, and the knowledge to move the department forward. I know she's been working very diligently with you, as well as other senators and representatives in the chamber. She's very committed to openness, working with the legislative branch, as well as those in the executive branch, building a bridge together, moving the department forward. So just wanted to come up, testifying in my personal capacity. So I'll take lunch now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a written testimony from Ed Sniffen, Department of Transportation. Doug Murdoch, you want to speak? Thank you. Louis Salaberry. Oh,
Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify. You have my written testimony and we strongly support Brenna's appointment to be the Director of Department of Human Resources. But I can unequivocally say that for the past 4 months that I've been working with her, specifically on the issues related to workforce, some of the things that we're doing, this most recent collective bargaining that just got agreed upon the other day. She's been a tremendous partner. She has a great grasp of all things, related to the human resources. She has to handle a very problematic deputy director too as well. But I have to say that she's been she's been an extremely great partner, and the state is very lucky to have her.
and congratulations on the settlement agreement.
Thank you.
And Sabrina Nasser, also with BNF, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, the governor, DLNR, and Hakeem Wansafi with Hawaii Public Housing Authority. All the senior management team and program managers of Department of Human Resources Development. Are they all here? Oh, stand. Department of Education and Department of Taxation. Okay, and I have 13 individuals all in support of Ms. Hashimoto. So, would you like to come up? Their statement.
Yes, thank you. Aloha and good afternoon, Chair Moriwaki, Vice Chair Lee, and members of the Committee on Labor and Technology. My name is Brenna Hashimoto, and I'm the Governor's nominee for the Director of the Department of Human Resources Development. Thank you for the opportunity to make an opening statement in support of my nomination to lead DHERD. Before I do so, I would first like to thank Governor Green for giving me this opportunity, my fellow cabinet members for their encouragement and enthusiasm, and the many hardworking and dedicated human resources colleagues throughout state government who are a continuous source of inspiration. I would also like to thank those who testified in support of my nomination today. I'm truly humbled and grateful. Before I share my thoughts on why I'm the right person for the job, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize a couple of people who had a tremendous impact on my career and helped me get to this moment. They include my late mother-in-law, June Hashimoto, who served for many years as the Chief of Recruitment and Examination for the City and County of Honolulu, and who encouraged me in 1991, fresh out of college and new to Hawaii, to pursue a career in state government and human resources. If salespeople practice the ABCs, in other words, always be closing the sale, my mother-in-law practiced the ABRs, always be recruiting. June promoted the virtues of government work to anyone and everyone she came into contact with, including me and my husband, John. Her passion for public service and for human resources work made a tremendous impression on me and led me to pursue a career in HR. I'd also like to thank David Knight, the former HR officer for the Division of Community Hospitals, which is now the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, and the Department of Health, who I was incredibly fortunate to work for and who I consider a mentor. And to the DHERD team, including Deputy Director Yamane, who continue to impress and motivate me every single day. Now I'd like to share with you a few of the reasons why I believe I'm the right person to lead DHERD. First, I believe that in order to be successful in a leadership position of such importance to the state, one needs to have first technical knowledge, a vision and plan for the future, and the support and commitment of stakeholders. With regard to my experience, as you can see from my resume, my entire professional career, over 30 years, has been in Hawaii State Government Human Resources. During that time, I've held positions in the Department of Health, the University of Hawaii System, and the Department of Human Services, specializing in nearly every aspect of public sector HR at one time or another. Each position has not only allowed me to gain considerable experience in this field, but also provided me with numerous opportunities to lead, facilitate, and support change and innovation in HR. While much can be accomplished at the individual departmental level, I'm seeking this opportunity to lead DHERD in order to drive change and innovation on a statewide level. Most executive branch departments and agencies rely on DHERD to develop and implement policies and procedures to attract and retain a qualified and capable workforce, and to provide the framework for a robust, comprehensive human resources program. I will be able to draw on my years of specialized HR experience and natural inclination to problem solve to see that DHERD meets the changing HR needs of the state. Second, I have a vision for DHERD, which includes rebuilding our capacity so that we can meet the HR challenges of the state. Among my highest priorities will be addressing the high vacancy rate of civil service positions throughout the executive branch, modernizing the workers' compensation claims management processes, implementing technological solutions for manual processes, researching and addressing employee retention issues, and developing and updating policies and practices to make public service more attractive. Although DHERD is responsible for coordinating and conducting open, competitive recruitments, we need to look for ways to modernize, streamline, and improve our recruitment processes at all levels and all facets of the process. To that end, since joining DHERD, I have proposed and received Governor Green's approval and funding for the implementation of a human resources modernization project using coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds to support in part this effort. Specifically, the project will include 3 teams, 1 for recruitment, 1 for workers' compensation claims management, and 1 for data optimization. The recruitment accelerator team will consist of 5 specialized recruiters, each assigned to specific areas of need. For example, engineering, public safety and law enforcement, healthcare, social services, blue-collar jobs, and administrative jobs, with targeted resources to leverage the use of technology and community networking for the purpose of reducing our vacancies throughout the executive branch. This team will combine the use of subscription, employment-based social media platforms and community networking with educational institutions of all levels and job fairs on a regular basis. The recruiters will focus on promoting the executive branch as an employer of choice, targeting likely sources of talent, and ensuring that applications are reviewed and referred to departments expeditiously. My hope is that this project will serve as a proof of concept and will provide the justification for effectiveness that this recruitment model, thereby positioning DHERD to ask the legislature and the administration for ongoing support. On a personal level, those who've worked with me will tell you that I'm a passionate and optimistic about public service and human resources. Throughout my career, I've always endeavored to be fair, responsive, dependable, and communicative. These qualities will benefit DHERD and the state because all 4 are essential to effectively leading change. Where others see roadblocks, I see stepping stones. I'm looking forward to working with Governor Green, the legislature, and the other directors to effectuate positive changes throughout DHERD and the executive branch. If confirmed, I can assure you that I will work tirelessly to meet the needs of the departments and your expectations. I humbly ask for your support and favorable consideration. Mahalo.
Thank you. Questions?
Congratulations again on your nomination.
Thank you.
And thanks for doing what you're doing. Just following up on some of the discussion from before, when it comes to remote work and what that all looks like. You know, it seems like right now there's sort of a department by department basis for deciding what that looks like in practice. I imagine, as I mentioned in the prior discussion, that it seems to be going more toward flexibility, remote capability, all that kind of stuff. do you see sort of a long-term future that would require sort of that broad flexibility to be baked into the process that we have now as an expectation to be able to attract and retain folks?
Certainly. I think, the workforce has changed over the last 3 years since COVID. There's an expectation of flexibility with a lot of younger folks, especially, that they're looking for that. And when they're looking for jobs, they're looking at flexibility, they're looking at benefits, they're looking at pay. And so we would be remiss if we didn't consider that as part of our recruitment tools. We do have some considerations that we need to be aware of. You mentioned one of them, which is that not all workplaces are conducive to remote working. However, where it's possible and feasible, I think we should endeavor to try to make our workplaces flexible. There's a lot that we can do around communication. I know some of the concerns I've heard is around how do we ensure that employees are productive. And to that endeavor, it's not only folks that are working remotely, but how do we know folks that are in the office are productive, right? It's not just looking at folks who we can't see visually. And to that end, I would really like to see our performance management system move online to be something that's an electronic tool. My team has been doing some research on different products that are out there, and we've seen a lot of different models where we can have a lot more metrics and deadlines built into our performance management system. And I think those would be helpful regardless of the employees in the office or working remotely. I think communication is really important in order to make sure that work gets done. Employees have to know what's expected and how they're going to be measured, and what the quality and the quantity and the timeliness of their work needs to look like.
So, going forward, who should lead that, right? Because you sort of need some leadership and ownership of that, because right now each department is doing its own thing, which surely can't be the best way in the long run. There's a whole bunch of different silos.
Right. So DHERD was instrumental in negotiating the overall program, the guidelines and the forms. And moving forward, we just rolled out the training. There's 3 training modules that are necessary for anybody that wants to participate in telework. There's a training for employees, there's a training, like a general overview of the guidelines. Then there's a training that's just for the employees who are going to be teleworking. And then there's a 3rd module that's intended for supervisors to give them some tips and tools on how to manage a remote workforce. And so it's going to have to be, we're going to have to give some folks some time to absorb all of that information. DHERD will, of course, be there to advise and to assist in any way that we can. We're also been talking with Senator Moriwaki about perhaps having a telework coordinator that could take on some of this consultative role. And there's a lot of electronic tools out there that can help as well to help make these processes more uniform. For example, everybody is familiar with monitoring click actions on your computers, but a lot of our employees aren't necessarily tied to a computer all day. So how do we measure that? And there are some electronic tools out there that can help us do that.
So just following up on that, what happens when you get a situation where a particular department doesn't want to change, and you have, I don't know, whatever, someone who's just living in the Stone Age still, and so how do we prevent that from becoming a bottleneck, right, for getting good people into positions? Is it your agency then that sort of can take the reins? How's that set up? Or how should it be, I guess?
I would want to be respectful of that director, because I would imagine that they have very good reasons why they're reluctant. However, I think with some education and maybe some testimonials from other directors that where they've found that it's very productive, that perhaps we could convince them otherwise. I personally like to see a hybrid work environment. I like to see my team periodically, actually regularly, but I also understand that for their own personal well-being and productivity, that they like to have the option to telework. So I think a hybrid where they're in the office a few days a week and can telework the other days is is ideal. And I would encourage them to try it. You know, it's easy to be skeptical, but once you try it, and then you have to really take a hard look at what's not being accomplished or what is being accomplished, and then go from there. But I would rather encourage them to try than to just discount it entirely without consideration.
And Trevor, just follow. You know, there've been a lot of experiments and studies and implementation in the private sector looking at not just remote work, but shifting flexibility, providing 4-day work weeks where you can do like 4, you know, whatever the math you want to pick is, right? Or in some cases 3. How do we take advantage of that sort of thing when clearly the results by and large have been both better for employees and an ability to better manage lives and quality of life and all that, and where productivity is in many cases increased overall while working fewer hours?
So
How do we game that out? And figure
we
out
do
what can
have,
apply?
the state actually has a long-standing policy called the alternative work week policy, where we do actually permit a 4-day work week, 4 10-hour days. There are also some other variations on that, but there is already the opportunity for employees to consider those. I don't believe they've been adopted very widely. I mean, nobody really teleworked until COVID, and now, you know, the things have changed considerably in those 3 years. So it could be a combination of different approaches. The alternative work week one, though, has not really taken off like remote work has.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. You know, it's a long day. 10 hours is a long day. I know from my experience at DHS, we had our nurses at the youth correction facility that work sometimes 12-hour shifts, and I know nurses in some other areas do that as well. And that's kind of typical of that industry. But you know, it has to be something that the employees want as well, because there are collective bargaining considerations. Right now, the state is required to pay overtime by collective bargaining when an employee works over 8 hours a day. So if they're working 10 or 12 hours, that would be something we would have to, the details we have to work out with the union if we're going to make additional changes to the agreement.
In those places or offices where it makes sense, because obviously it doesn't make sense everywhere.
Right.
If you can maintain or improve productivity just on the whole, what about reducing overall worked hours, just period? So instead of 4 10-hour days, you're looking at 4 8-hour days.
That would be something that would have to be negotiated.
Okay.
I think we'd all like that one, but I'm not sure that we can sell that one.
Because that's what struck me more than anything out of the pandemic, where you had all these like major companies and whatnot, right, doing that, and realizing that actually you have better flexibility for employees. They have more time to do life, family stuff, that kind of thing. So morale goes up, productivity in the hours that they are working, even though it's fewer hours, is still increased overall. And that seems to be, from everything I've seen anyway, true like almost universally in almost every single case where it's been tried, where you have companies now that have adopted that permanently in a lot of cases. And certainly some other countries looking at similar things. I understand there's obviously collective bargaining and a whole bunch of other layers here that don't make it as straightforward as one might think. But how do we, is there anywhere where that's even part of a discussion right now? And how do we sort of bring that up in a way and make it sort of a real discussion?
I'm not aware of anybody that's pursuing that. You know, there's, for some offices that could be closed three days a week, you know, that would work. But we also have a lot of operations where they're 24/7, our hospitals, our correctional facilities. And so and we're already short staffed. So to reduce the work week from 40 hours to say 32 hours would require a lot more manpower to cover all of that additional workload. So as far as I'm aware, there's no consideration to doing that currently.
But in those offices where it does make sense, where you're pushing papers around, that sort of thing, or any number of situations, if that is the case, that you have the capacity for higher productivity there while working less, which would in turn make it way more attractive for people who are qualified to want to take on those positions, who are more efficient and want to really dive in. How do we launch that conversation?
Again, that would be something that would have to be negotiated And I would think it would have a considerable ripple effect across all of the state because all of our collective bargaining agreements not only impact the state, but the counties and the other jurisdictions as well. So it would have to be a very large conversation.
Is it one you're game for?
I don't hold the purse strings. You might have to talk to Lewis with, about whether we could afford something like that.
Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
as you move towards outcome-driven metrics, then you've got something to measure productivity. Then you can talk about productivity versus just time in the office or, number of hours worked. And I think that was the easy metric. So there we have it with collective bargaining, but it has to go back to collective bargaining and at least have the conversation.
I don't think that would be a hard sell, except for perhaps with the budget folks.
But talking about collective bargaining, you mentioned that there are very few retention incentives. We talked about recruitment, which is a big problem, but also retention and keeping good people. And you say that there are constraints due to collective bargaining. What might that be, and you were going to do some interviews. So what might you look at to create some incentives that you can bargain for in keeping people and keeping good people?
Right. So our statute requires basically once we hire an employee and we set their initial pay, then everything that happens after that, for the most part, is subject to collective bargaining. And so there are very few tools that are available in order to address retention. But from my experience, retention, it's not always about compensation. There's a lot of factors that go into what makes employees stay and also what drives them to leave, to look for other opportunities. So I strongly feel like we need to understand why our employees stay, what attracts them to government work, and why do they stay versus, and then also those folks who leave. What are they moving for, better opportunities? Is it the benefits? Is it the work environment? Is it flexibility around remote work? And in order to put our resources in the right, focus on the right issue, I think we really need to take a look at that before we do anything. And so I'd like to do some kind of survey.
Collecting, or are departments required to collect exit data so when the person leaves? I know way before we used to ask them, why are you leaving? Do you have that kind of
We
thing?
do not. However, it's not required. However, the DHERD training staff has developed an exit survey that they are able to customize for individual departments. But I would really like to see it something that we do statewide. So DHERD would take that on and we would collect the data. And I would also like to do a survey of our employees. Like I said, I think it's important to understand why folks stay in government work, what attracted them in the first place, and whether our benefit package and the work environment is meeting their expectations. And because it could be things around training, it could be things around, opportunities for advancement. It could be the benefits. We spend an awful lot of money related to employee benefits, but if we're not giving employees what they want, what they need, then we should be shifting our focus into the areas that are more attractive to them. So I'd like to do a survey not only of those folks that leave, but also of our current employees to find out what their needs are.
Going back to recruitment, you said that the problem in recruitment may not always be yours, but requests are stuck at the departments. Can you briefly elaborate what that means and how you might get those requests unstuck from the departments?
So as you can imagine, the position becomes vacant and it's really up to the department to determine whether they're going to attempt to fill the job at that point in time. They're not obligated to. That's a management decision as to whether they seek to fill that position. Sometimes those positions become involved in a reorganization, or they want to redescribe them, change the job somehow. So there may be a delay in recruitment. Then once they do decide to fill a job, normally they would start within their own department. And so DHERD is not involved in that the competitive process within their own department for promotions. It's only if they can't fill it internally, then they would submit a request to DHERD, and we would get involved in trying to fill the position from either from another agency or from the external, from the general public. So there's a lot that happens in the department before it comes to our attention. And then once we do the recruitment, then we of course turn the names of those individuals who've been deemed qualified and are interested in being considered, we turn that back over to the department. And sometimes for whatever reason, perhaps their priorities change or the timing is not right. But then again, it's back in their court. So I would like to see us look at the entire recruitment process from the very beginning until the very end and see where we can tighten things up, where we can be more responsive at all points in time. That's not to say that I'm going to substitute my judgment for that of another director or of another department, but just so that we make sure that if in fact we are trying to recruit, that we're doing things timely at each juncture. Because I really believe that we lose candidates when we're not timely. And so at each point, I would like to work with the departmental HR officers to make sure that we're responsive
How
consistently.
the department heads or the programs come to you to say, these are really high priority? I mean, everybody says they're high priority, but if you look at the vacancy of some, they've been going on for like 3 years or, you know, so have you had that kind of conversation with departments to say which are really needed for you to better serve the public and which do we need to address and how, whether it's within the Department of Internal Recruitment or coming to us to look at even reclassifying positions or consolidating positions, whatever that is.
So most of the time when it comes to my attention, it's because they haven't been able to fill it internally. So they've done their best to try to fill that job within their own staff, and then they would come to DHERD. So I think all jobs are important. They all have serve a purpose. So there's been a few that directors have pointed out we need to do more recruitment in certain areas. Deputy sheriffs is one, corrections officers is another. Even Director Salivar will tell you he's looking for program budget analysts, and they're all important. Office assistants are important. So I don't try to prioritize. I think we need to try to fill every job that's under recruitment. And I'm willing to consider all sorts of different tools and approaches depending upon what's appropriate for that class of work, whether it be in person. We know we're not going to find janitors and office assistants the same place that we're going to find engineers and doctors and nurses. And we need to be able to be responsive to those different groups.
Workers' compensation,
Mhm.
the budget is about 20% of your total budget. What will you do to bring down that $5 million of claims, and what are you doing? I know that you're saying it's one of the special groups that you're putting together, but what is your intention in terms of what this workers' comp team will do so that we do prevent injuries, number one, and number two, get them off workers' comp?
Right. So
Get them
workers'
the
comp
job.
is a complicated program, and it's complicated for various reasons. First of all, we're exceedingly short-staffed in that area. So we're trying to fill all of our vacancies so that we have more eyes on each claim, and we're better able to manage each claim. But I think if you were to talk to our division administrator, she'll tell you that the actual number of claims, open claims, has come down considerably. And although the costs are higher, a lot of that is attributed to the fact that we're closing and settling old claims that have been sitting around. And so our hope, our plan is that the actual cost will come down in subsequent years. And that part of our modernization project is to move what we now do manually. All of the processing for claims is all done manually. And our plan is to use some resources that the legislature appropriated this past year to use software to help us do the claims management. We feel like it will make our claims managers more effective, more efficient. And it will also give us some data around our claims in terms of what you mentioned earlier about where are claims happening, what are the likely sources of injuries. And then we have a small safety team, very small, 2 people, that can then use that data to help those individual departments address those safety concerns.
One last question, the program memorandum question on outcomes. I'm very interested in metrics for outcomes. Have you looked at your measures of effectiveness and whether in processing activities or number of items, looking at what the metrics might be in terms of whether it's recruitment, retention, or worker health and safety? I don't know, but looking at those measures, have you had any thoughts about looking at what those outcomes might be to rate whether we've done our job or not?
Right. So I did have an opportunity to look at our variance report and the measures of effectiveness that DHERD has established. And some of them are very good, and they're around timeliness of getting out lists to departments, which I think is important. It's something that's a priority for me. And then there's a few others that I feel are less indicative of a well-functioning organization. So from what I understand, we have the opportunity to make revisions to this document every biennium. I actually did this recently while I was at Human Services, and it was twofold. We really wanted to focus on the recruitment piece and making sure that we were filling jobs. And then we also wanted to look at retention and how what our numbers were in terms of retaining staff that we hired. Because while recruitment is critical, if we're not keeping those folks we hire, then we're not very effective. So I would like to see DHERD, some of our metrics move in that direction, where we're looking at retention and perhaps looking at how we can improve those numbers moving forward. So I'm committed to looking at this further with budget and finance.
Okay, yeah, budget and finance, and also I see all your program managers here, and looking at them, because they're the ones that have to be doing the work to get the results. So I would like to see what you folks come up with, but I think that's really important as we go forward in terms of transforming government, is knowing that what we're doing when we're changing our behaviors or our activities to do better for the state.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. We're going to take a short recess because we are waiting for quorum, and we will be back with decision making. For the 3 p.m. agenda, the Labor and Technology Committee, we are going to decision making on GM 503, submitting for consideration and confirmation Doug Murdoch as Chief Information Officer for a term to expire noon, December 7th, 2026. The work of the Office of Enterprise Technology Services over the past 2 years has pivoted from the COVID days to transforming our executive branch technology system, upgrading our legacy systems, re-engineering IT systems based on a customer-centered model, moving to a cloud-based service, and working on consolidation with all executive departments on governance and staffing issues. These projects are influencing departments to work more closely with the office and making cost-effective IT decisions. The IT strategic plan, with its 7 strategic priorities, will help state government serve the public better. And if successful, we will attract and keep the talent we need. The state benefits with Doug's outcome-driven, problem-solving, team building, his commitment to the IT strategic plan and its priorities, and to consolidation of the 13 committees that he has with proposed deliverables. He has proven he's committed to outcomes and timelines, and he has delivered. I'd like to just quote from some of his staff that leads me to believe that he is the right person for this, to continue his term, second term. Doug fosters a team culture which promotes collaboration, creativity, and innovation. His even-keeled, listen-first leadership style has empowered office staff, engaged department stakeholders, and produced significant achievement in ensuring critical services are delivered to the public by optimum use of information technology. And his dedication and work ethic are a source of inspiration for everyone around him. That's quite impressive. So based on your proven ability to get the job done with an inspired team, the chair recommends the committee advise and consent Doug Murdoch as the state's Chief Information Officer. Chair, any questions, any comments? Okay, then the chair votes aye. Vice Chair Lee.
Voting on GM 503, recommendation is to advise and consent. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Senator Ihara.
Aye.
Senator Keith Ageron excuse. Senator Favela.
Aye.
Chair recommendation adopted.
Congratulations, you are recommended for the Chief Information Officer of the state. We have our second GM 513 submitting Brenna Hashimoto as a Director of Human Resources Development, again for a term to expire December 7th, 2026 at noon. I have a very special interest in the department, having served as director when, like Ms. Hashimoto, the department had about 70 staff, all personnel actions were centralized. We were able to grow the department to about 150 employees to train and consult with all departments, enable decentralizing a number of services. Unfortunately, the department has since been hit hard, and as of last June, it's down to 63 employees. Yet we expect the department to meet our needs, fill the almost 4,000 vacancies, adjust classification and compensation so we get the staff we need, create more incentives to recruit and retain employees such as telework. But telework has not been executed consistently within and across departments, as Senator Lee has noted. The department is directed to provide guidance to departments to assure that the public, that folks who are working remotely are really working and doing the public's work. So there's much to do, and Ms. Hashimoto, with her 30 years of experience in human resources, has shown she is up to the challenge. In her 4 months, she has hit the ground running, responding to whatever issue came before the committee: repricing, bargaining unit creation, classification, compensation issues. She knows the laws and policies and provides accurate guidance for fair decisions. As for inspiring her management team, she is the only nominee that I know of who has all her senior management team and program managers submit testimony. And here's what they say. From the moment she started on December 5th, 2022, Brenna's transition was seamless, thanks to her familiarity with many of DHER's programs and functions. We know she's dedicated, hardworking, and responsive to us, as well as her colleagues. Even with her 30 years of service, Brenna has not allowed the human resources system to become ingrained in her. Instead, her approach to addressing human resource matters is inspired by her creativity and innovation to be more efficient, which is what we're all asking for. So with her knowledge, vision for our employees, and service to the public's needs, and the support of her team and other departments, Ms. Hashimoto is the best person to lead the transformation of the state human resources system, starting with our biggest asset, our employees. So the chair's recommendation is to advise and consent Brenna Hashimoto as the director of the Department of Human Resources Development. Members, questions, comments? Chair votes aye. Vice Chair Lee.
Voting on GM 513, recommendation is to advise and consent. Noting 4 members present, are there any reservations or no's? If not, recommendations adopted.
Congratulations, Brenna Hashimoto is a new colleague. Hearing is adjourned.